Hello everyone. Today is a historic day, for me at least. As you can imagine, I've had the question put to me, how did you get into gaming, Britta? Many times. Practically as long as I've had the channel. And the answer is not a straightforward one. It's quite a story. It's quite a journey. I was sort of getting ready to tell that story just over a year ago. Those of you who've been around for at least that long, like a year and a half, will probably remember that back then in 2020, it was a very difficult time for me and the channel, due to a huge influx of people and an overwhelming amount of highly unpleasant and negative comments, in particular in the comments for individual videos, which was the reason why I shut those down. So by the time I had shut down the comments on the videos and was just letting things settle, I had a good hard think about this project for doing a video about how I got into gaming, because inevitably, I think for anyone, that would be quite a personal story. It concerns your personal life, how you started gaming and what gaming means to you. And in my case, there was a particular angle that involves some very personal information concerning me and Poodlepa that I decided was simply not safe for me to discuss in public. So I hope you will understand that today I am ready to tell you the story, but there is one part of it that is highly private, that I'm not going to go into details. It doesn't really matter for you understanding how I got into gaming. So I've learned a lot in the last couple of years, and there are certain things that I believe firmly should stay private, even for channels that, like mine, give you a bit of an insight into my life. So with all that out of the way, all I just want to say, especially remembering that back history with the comments on my channel, please remember to keep it friendly and respectful. This is supposed to be a friendly and enjoyable space for people to talk about their favorite hobby. How did it all start? Well, sometimes backtracking is difficult because you don't lead your life keeping a sort of diary. Well, maybe some people do, but I don't. Certain things tend to get a bit lost in the mists of time, especially at my age. But I do remember one fizzle I had. Back in the early 2000s, I was working with computers, with networks, with servers, and that was really my life, and my main interest was very techy, and I was certainly aware that there were video games on PC. It just had never sort of tickled my interest, so to speak. But in 2004, and I still got the invoice, I got a new computer for Windows XP, and it was a mini barebones kit, a little shuttle, beautiful little computer. Now, that came with a Gigabyte GeForce FX 5900 XT video card sporting 128 megabytes of DDR memory. The whole thing ran an Intel Pentium 4 at 2.8 gigahertz. So it was a very sleek and fast little unit for the time. And it came with several discs. One of them was for a Tomb Raider video game. This particular computer was sort of promoted as being ideal for running this Tomb Raider game and other PC games. You will be amazed. And I didn't really think further about it until one day I had a bit of time on my hands, which was unusual, and I saw this disc lying around and I thought, oh, I wonder how that works. I'll just pop it in the disc tray. And you know what happened? The thing wouldn't even boot up. I was not impressed. Now, I wasn't exactly ignorant about computers, so I fiddled around a bit. I then did what any self-respecting techie does. I went online and looked around for information. And I found several forums, including the Steam communities, all discussing this game and how to get it to run on PCs. Now, the game, well, you will ask me which game it was, but I honestly don't remember. I think it must have been the one published in 2003 called The Angel of Darkness, which Google tells me has not got a very good scorecard. Anyway, I looked online and the advice was extensive. You had to do all sorts of stuff to tweak your computer, fiddle with the Windows system files, do all sorts of stuff. If you followed the whole thing, it would take anywhere between 2 and 4 hours of really hard work. I tried some of the quick fixes, but nothing worked. And I thought, what am I doing? This was supposed to be just a brief respite amongst the workload, just a bit of enjoyment and relaxation. This feels like work, having to, fiddle with files. It's like me trying to track down something on an email server that isn't working. I thought, this is crazy. If this is what gaming is like, you can keep it. I'm not interested. And I took the disc, and I remember that, and I aimed it at the waste paper basket, and the dogs were watching me like, what's that? What's she throwing away? Is it food? And I threw it into the basket, and out it went. And I never thought about it again. Honestly, that was it. Of course, consoles, even the word gaming console, meant nothing to me. I'd never seen one. The word console I would have associated with a piece of old-fashioned furniture, like a buffet or something. It just wasn't there in my world. So now we fast forward to 2012, the end of the year. And this is when Poodlepa and I went through a really sad and very traumatic period in our lives. All I can say is anyone who's been through a major trauma, major grief, will know what I'm talking about. I mention it because this explains everything about how I got into gaming. Because as many people said, normally you wouldn't associate a 60-something-year-old woman with saying, oh, I think I'll try out some video games. It's not the first thing that would spring to mind. I quite accept that. But that's, of course, the question that most people mean when they ask me. But they ask me, they're trying to be polite, so they just say, how did you get into gaming? Meaning, how does someone of your age, 60 plus, suddenly pick up a console and a controller and start playing video games, and not just a little bit casually on the side, but, with real dedication? For that, you need to know that It was a terrible time in our lives, and we suffered from severe depression because of that. And I just want to say here, because this is really, really important, and you never forget that kind of pain and trauma and grief. If you are going through anything like that, that is causing you such severe pain that you find it difficult getting up in the morning and just facing life, please, please, please don't suffer in silence on your own. Go and seek help. People who are really close to you will usually empathize a huge amount. That can be helpful, and it's always good to have family and friends about in a situation like that. But sometimes I know it can be overwhelming. Sometimes it is actually better to have a third party who is removed from you, look at your situation, and just try and counsel you through it. And that's what Poodlepart and I did in the end. We had a counselling session, and later on I booked another one. I was actually quite amazed. We hadn't expected much, but if you see someone who is properly qualified and registered, etc., my experience was a very positive one. And I would recommend it, not because this person has the magic key that can suddenly take away all your pain and make you feel okay again the next day. That's cloud cuckoo land. That just doesn't exist. That doesn't happen. And none of these counsellors or other professionals would ever claim to be able to do that. But I found it really helpful to have someone who didn't know us and talks to us in a professional capacity, but still has that empathy. That brought a different angle to everything. And the one thing that was really important for us, I felt, was what I call the validation. That they take you seriously. You don't have to somehow explain or justify who you are or what you're going through. They accept you and your experience at your word, because one of the reasons is they have seen it so many times before. You only know your own pain, and you think you might be the only person going through this, but you aren't. There are many, many others out there. They can assure you that it'll probably take a long, long time until you come out at the other end, but that you will and you can do it. And to us, that was really important. It gives you a feeling that just all the amount of love and affection that a family member or friend might pour out, that's not the same thing. It's just something from a different angle that tells you you don't have to question yourself over, am I justified to feel like this? Should I just try and pretend everything's okay? No. And if you ever hear the words, oh, don't worry, you'll get over it, that is the most empty, meaningless phrase I've heard too many times. The truth is, you never do get over it, and that's something you have to accept. You learn to live with what happened and with the pain, and you learn to manage it. And over time, you will build yourself a life that incorporates the difficult and traumatic parts of your life, as well as the good things. You will end up a different person, but I would say probably a better and a stronger one. So it's important for me to try and pass that on, especially young people I know often hesitate. Please do seek help, and professional help if you need it. So what happened? Well, we had a pretty awful Christmas, as you can imagine. And the problem is when you're in such a state of trauma that you tend to go round in circles. You cannot escape the dreadful circle. And you'll know what I mean if you've got one of those pains in your life. The question is how to break that circle. And with us, almost everything failed, like, what I would normally do, like pick up a book or sit down and watch a movie with Poodle Pa. No, your brain will just walk away and, go back to the pain. That's what happens. So we did everything and anything we could think of, like, Poodle Pa started clearing up the garage, and I decided to go through the spare bedroom, where I don't know if you do this, but I tend to, when I've got something that I don't know where to store away or where to keep, and I think, what shall I do with that? I shove it under the bed in the spare bedroom. We all do funny things. So I had a few items there I pulled out and I sorted out, and among them was a box I at first didn't recognise. And it was this. Yes, a PS3 Slim, 160 gigabytes of storage. Those were the days. It says on the back, start storing everything in one place with so much hard disk space, it's easy to save your favourite downloadable games, plus movies, music and photos. The complete entertainment centre. And I remembered that I had won it in a sort of competition for, with the DVD service I was subscribing to for all our movies. And that's what we did back in the day. We got discs in the mail and we absolutely loved it. It was a great service, and they had an online community where everybody could leave short reviews of what they'd watched. And they had a sort of rolling competition there. I wasn't even really aware of it, but I left a review for a movie that probably very few people know. But because I'm heavily into classic movies, especially black and white, it really appealed to me. So when the movie distribution service shut down, because everything was going online, of course, I made sure to grab that particular disc. They were giving away discs to subscribers, and this was the movie. Day of Wrath by Carl Theodor Dreiser, filmed in 1943 during the Nazi occupation of Denmark. Day of Wrath uses the larger narrative of witch hunts in a historical setting, it's 17th century, I think, to point out the paranoid obsession of the period. And it's basically around a love story. And if you think of horror and what that genre usually entails, this movie has nothing of that. It's basically a period drama, and it is one of the most horrifying movies I've ever watched. It's a bit like a stage play, because that's how they did movies in those days, but it's just extraordinary. If you ever get a chance to see it, I would recommend you do so. It's quite an experience. Anyway, I left a short review of this movie, obviously a very positive one, and a few weeks later I got an email saying, "Congratulations, Britta, you were the winner of our movie review competition and you've won a..." And I thought, what have I won? Some really neat electronic gadget, something I can use with my computer. A PlayStation 3. And I thought, what the heck is a PlayStation 3? I'd seen the posters up in the mall. There was a shop called EB Games, and I'd seen posters for PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo, so I knew the names. And I thought, of all the useless things to win, I would win that. And I shoved the box. I didn't even open it or anything. No reason to. I shoved it under the bed and forgot about it. So this must have been... The PlayStation 3 Slim came out in 2009. I looked that up in the latter part. So I'm guessing this competition might have been in 2010 when they were given by Sony maybe a unit or several for promotional purposes. And that's how I got one. So until 2012, the end of 2012, it was sitting under the bed and I'd forgotten about it. Well, in early 2013, when we were still groping around trying to, get some kind of normality into our life, I found the box and thought, I really need to tidy this up. I need to get rid of this. It's a pretty large box. This is where the really strange story starts, because you'd think it should be possible to get rid of, i.e. sell or give away or whatever, a PlayStation 3 in 2013. And I found it incredibly difficult. It was almost as if that PS3 was clinging on for dear life, saying, no, you're not going to get rid of me so easily. So I took photos of the beautiful, pristine, sealed box and posted it on our online trading site here in New Zealand. It's called Trade Me. And I wasn't aware that back in those days, they must have had some policy. Anyway, I got an irate email from them saying, you can't do that. The box is sealed. Prospective buyers have a right to see what's inside. You need to show all the items that are in the box. And I thought, so I can't sell it like new, because once I open the box, it's second hand. Oh well, I opened the box and I thought, well, since it's open anyway, I might as well have a look at it. We had at the time just bought a new TV set with a recorder that also played Blu-ray discs. Oh yes, Blu-ray, that was a big thing. And I had heard, being kind of techie and reading all the news, that the PlayStation 3 was one of the earliest machines on the market being able to play Blu-ray discs. So I thought, well, that's interesting. It's just something for me to do to basically pass the time. And I set it all up and I took out some of my favourite Blu-rays and test drove them both on our VCR unit and on the PS3. And for about an hour, that kept me entertained, so to speak. Just for the record, the PS3 comes out very well. It was very, very hard, actually, to see a difference between it and the dedicated Blu-ray player. So I then got all the bits and pieces and thought, I now need to take photos, upload them to Trade Me, blah, blah. And you know what? My camera went bust. In those days, I still had a digital camera. I actually didn't have a smartphone back then. I can't remember why. I was sort of quite traditional in my computing. And I thought, oh great, what do I do now? I bundled up the box and took it down to our local cash and carry. Now you have to imagine this scene. This is me arriving, a 60-something old lady with glasses dangling, And I stepped inside, and there was a sort of somewhat slovenly older man behind the counter. And usually people in New Zealand are pretty friendly and relaxed, And I said, "Good day, how's it going? I've got this PlayStation 3, I don't need it. Can you sell it?" Because I think that's how it worked. They sold on your behalf or something. And he looked at me, he sort of bored into my eyes with his weaselly little pupils and said, "How do I know that's not stolen goods?" Of all the things, that was the one I hadn't expected. Maybe I should have been aware of it, but I wasn't. I was just flummoxed, I was speechless. And I said, well, it isn't stolen, it's mine. I won it in a competition. Have you got an invoice? I didn't have an invoice because I'd won it in a competition. They'd just send a little congratulations note with it. I didn't think that after over 2 years I'd be lucky enough to get some kind of invoice out of them. So I trundled out of that cash and carry again, lugging that quite heavy box, and I was beginning to get a bit fed up. And so I left it standing in the hallway to remind me to do something about it. And every time I walked past, I would stub my toe on it and usually utter a few choice words. But the PS3 didn't budge. It just stayed there and said, basically, "I'm not moving. You cabled me up once. Why not again?" My final attempt was a strange service that you've probably never heard of called Fish Pond, which is terrible. But back then they were still, quite a big thing. And they were at the time offering a service where they would pick up the goods from you, advertise them, sell them on your behalf, and then after deducting a fee, you would get the remainder. And I thought, well, maybe that's the easiest option now. I didn't have to prove to them that it wasn't stolen goods. And I kept a note saying, "Ring them up to arrange this." And this is where it gets really strange. Stranger things have happened, but this is strange but true. I did not ring. And a week passed, and another week passed, and I still walked past that box and stubbed my toe, and I could not understand why I wasn't doing it. What was keeping me back? So one day when Poodlepa and I were sitting there yet again saying, what do we do? What do we do? What can we do to take our minds off everything? I said, this PlayStation's designed to play games. Why don't we try that? Where do you get games? And I didn't want to go to EB Games and actually buy something because I still wasn't thinking I'd keep the unit. And Poodlepa said, there's the video rental shop downtown, and they have some games. So we went down to the rental shop, and I asked the lady there, could she recommend me some games for someone who'd never played before that would be suitable? And to her eternal credit, she looked at me and she didn't bat an eyelid. I suppose, predictably, she tried to give me something that was considered simple, suitable for children. I did some backtracking, and the PlayStation trophy list is quite useful for that. I figured out that the very first games I got from that rental shop were Rise of the Guardians, Brave, based on the 2012 movie by Pixar, which happened to be one of our favourite movies at that time, and something called Carnival Island. I can't say that I got along terribly well with the games. We had them for 1 week, just a few dollars because they were older games or discounted or something. And it was, well, mainly trying to figure out, how does this work? How do you use a controller? How do you get a character to move? How do you open a door? Really, really simple stuff. But I made some headway. The Carnival Island looked pretty horrid, I thought. It was clearly aimed at children, but looked pretty cheaply made, and I backed out straight away. Rise of the Guardians, I didn't realise was based on some movie franchise that I wasn't familiar with. So the characters and everything, you were dropped straight into the story. It didn't make any sense to me. I only found out much later that I think the game is actually meant to be a co-op game. So me trying to play it on my own didn't work that well, and for a rank beginner, it really was difficult. That didn't really hit the mark either, but the one game that I did respond to was Brave. And I backtracked and kept a note. I played that in March 2013. Now this, I know I played quite a bit. Only recently this year I decided to finally get a physical copy for nostalgia reasons. But when I popped it into my PS3 to check it, I was pulled straight back into the story and the lovely graphics. For a licensed game, one based on a franchise, which we all know they're usually made for purely monetary reasons and normally not very good, I actually think this is pretty decent, and I quite like it.
She go? Mom, wait! Come back! Mum knocking down those trees. Stop, Mum! Probably didn't ever expect to see a princess chasing a bear through the forest. But that's fine. I've rarely been accused of acting like a princess. I'm Merida, my father's daughter. That's him, Fergus, the Bear King of Dumbroch. He taught me to ride a horse, swing a sword, shoot a bow. But presiding over the court, that's my mother's speciality. Queen Eleanor, the diplomat. She's always trying to teach me to be a proper princess. She doesn't understand me. She doesn't even try. Ugh, I wish she were different. Here's a fine weapon. Nice bit of gold. A bow! chasing her. Oh! This is all that witch's fault. Ordered the witch to give me a spell. Demanded it. Ugh, what a fool I was. Mother into a bear. This is all your fault.
My fault. My fault.
My fault? Oh, but who am I to refuse the future Queen of Dunbroch?
All right, but you tricked me.
Anger and mistrust. That's what caused this in the first place.
Ha! A bit of earth magic to help me against the monsters.
And I noticed that what took me originally an hour to get through just one tiny part of the prologue action, I can now skate through in a few minutes. So that tells you how painfully difficult it can be for an older person starting out with something very unfamiliar like video games. But the important thing was I'd had that first taste. We returned the games. I can't remember quite what happened after that, but I obviously kept the unit connected up and I continued playing because I have a record of playing in March and then in April and May. And I think what happened was that I discovered the PlayStation Network store online. Mind blown. Gosh, there was so much stuff there. Amazing. And I started wading through everything, looking at every game, reading all the information. I then went online and checked out every game and basically started doing research, which is what I always do, and simply learning about the history of video games, where they all started, where are we at now. So that was back in 2013. And a whole new world opened up. And I think that's what I needed at that point. A completely new world that I could not only immerse myself in. I mean, you can do that with movies and puzzles and books, if you want to. No, a world that would so capture every part of me because I had to be so involved. I was learning all the time. I was learning physical skills with the controller. I was learning about how games work. And I quickly discovered what types of games I really liked. And I will just go briefly through the early months. So for April, I only have one record showing, and that is for Flow from the Journey collection. So obviously, I think I bought that collection very, very early on. So that has Journey in it, Flower and Flow. So I definitely was playing Flow. And, I play it to this day. I always keep it on one of my Vitas. I really love that game. In May, I've got a record for Dante's Inferno and Trine. In June, it's Disgaea 4 and Jacob Jones, which came out at the time for the Vita and was my first Vita game. Yes, I bought a Vita in June 2013. In July, I played Skylanders, and I still have the original box with the game, and it came with 3 figures and this portal thing you needed to put them on so they would pop into the game. Sort of a bit of a more convoluted amiibo type mechanism, I suppose. And I got into that a bit, and I was given a whole bag full of more figures by our friendly postie who turned up one day and saw me playing it and said, "Oh, I've got all these from my kids, you can have them." So I had a whole selection of them. So I played Skylanders. In August, I played a game that became really important to me, and that is Hyperdimension Neptunia. So, Neptunia, why on earth a game like that for an elderly lady who'd never played video games before? Well, you know what? It took me to a completely different place. And it's funny. And humour, as we all know, is the best medicine. Weird and wacky is what Neptunia, the Neptunia world is. And I still love the intro scene to this game to this day. I still think is heaps better than most of the other Neptunia game intros.
No way! Not even my sister and the other CPUs can stand up to her! No! Please, stop this! If things go on like this, game industry will be reduced to rubble!
Who are you? Get out of here!
Fools! Welcome to your graveyard. I've been kept here for 3 years. I've grown bored, so you better be fun little toys to play with!
I don't really get his rambling, but he seems fired up. I'll handle him, Compa. You hurry and get the CPUs. Yes! The share site's power! We might pull through! Yeah!
What's this light? My eyes! My eyes! My eyes!
It's working! Way to go, Gear! Did we make it?
So here was a completely weird and wacky world that I wasn't quite sure I understood, but I thought, heck, I don't care. I'm going along for the ride. This was just wonderful. So I became an early fan of Neptunia, and it did wonders for my mental health. You never know what's going to work, but Neptunia worked. It did for quite some time, and I've got all the other Neptunia games, and okay, in recent years, they've lost track really of what made the Neptunia games so great originally, and all the spin-offs. Yeah, I'm getting a bit tired of it, but that's the way of life. All I can say is, at the time, Neptunia did the trick, and I'll be eternally grateful for that. Nobody's claiming it's the most brilliant game in the world. It isn't. But it kept me hooked and entertained and smiling and, you know, just being part of this secret, wacky world. I tried lots of different games in those early days, and I suppose it might be a habit that's just stuck with me, that I didn't want to pin myself down. I wanted to find out pretty much the whole range, and well, I knew straight away, for obvious reasons, that I would never be into sports games or into motor racing games, but apart from that, I will try almost anything. So I don't know if you remember Sony's attempts with the Move controller, which you needed for this game, called Sorcery. And I've got that controller to this day. It's still working. Another early game I played, and I think there were a lot of demos on the PlayStation Network store back in those days. I do know that I downloaded a lot of them and tried them, and that's how I got onto a lot of the games I then played. And one of them, now don't laugh, don't scoff, please, is Lair. Yes, I know, but to me, as a beginner, that didn't concern me at the time, all the criticism from seasoned gamers. All I knew was that I could fly on a dragon and go into battle. And that was just amazing. And I honestly, even as a beginner and with bad hands and all that, I did not find the 6-axis controls as bad as some people made out, especially the early reviews. I believe they later fixed quite a lot of issues, and then of course the DualShock 3 was later changed. There were some mechanical, technical changes made, which since I only got onto the PlayStation 3 years after it was released, I didn't know about that. The DualShock 3 as I know it, and that's still my original one that came with the unit, and as you can see, I practically always play with the cable on because that's how I'm used to doing it, as I mentioned in the Xbox video. The controller worked pretty well for me in Lair, and I don't remember having any big issues. If there were issues, I always assumed it was me and my inexperience. I can't remember that it ever made the game unplayable for me. And to this day, I love just occasionally diving into Lair and just doing a bit of dragon flying. It's really cool. Now, another big thing happened at the time, and that was in July 2013. I decided to join PlayStation Plus. The reason was that they had 2 games they offered in their monthly selection that I was just dying to try out. And I thought, well, that's a great way of finding out. And I joined the service, and back in those days, PlayStation Plus was fantastic because we got not only PS3 games, but also Vita games, and they gave away often the best games on the Vita came to PS Plus. It was absolutely amazing. So you got 2 PS3 games, 2 Vita games, and then when the transition happened, 2 PS4 games. It was a great time to be on PlayStation and being a PS Plus subscriber. Well, the 2 games that got me into PS Plus were, yes, Kingdoms of Amalur, and I love that game because I did an unboxing video about the PS4 version not so long ago. And the other one, yes, Dragon's Dogma, another game I absolutely adore, and I have it on the PS4 obviously as well. That's where I play it now. But originally those were the 2 games that really, really got me hooked deep into RPGs, the PlayStation, everything. Now, October 2013 brought another new experience for me in the JRPG world, and one that is important to me to this day. And you will all know what I mean when I show you this game. Yes, a Tales game. And Tales of Graces F was my first ever Tales game. Since then I've bought, I think, all of them that are available in the West, including anything on the PS2 and of course all the PS3 ones and then PS4 ones. I absolutely adored Graces. I couldn't stop playing it. I had to stop playing it because I got stuck. I was playing already better by then, but let's face it, I'd only had like 6 months of learning on the job, so to speak. And Graces is not an easy game, especially in the latter stages. So I got stuck and I simply didn't know how to extricate myself, so I put it aside. I think now I might be actually capable, in terms of being a JRPG player, of actually finishing it. Yes, it's been a long journey, and it's not easy at my age, but as I always say, you take one step at a time, and you just keep moving. So in October, I played another Japanese game that I absolutely adore, and that is Okami. I first got it digitally on the PlayStation Network, but since then have obviously bought it physically as well. Unfortunately, it came out on the PS4 too. Now, November brought a game that is still dear to my heart, and that is, I don't have a physical copy because it doesn't exist for the PS3. It's called Rainbow Moon. It's a little indie game, and I started it back then and finished it and platinumed it a year and a half later. What can I say? I just wanted to play it and I just kept playing it. It's ideal because it introduces you very easily to the basics of a tactics RPG, how to work on a grid, all the moves, etc., how to plan your strategy. Those were my first footsteps in tactics, I think. I think I learned well from it. That basis stood me in good stead, and I will always remember Rainbow Moon really, really fondly for that reason, and because I enjoyed the heck out of it. But once I'd finished it, that was great. I was ready to move on. And as you probably know, tactics RPGs is, next to dungeon crawlers, my favourite subgenre in the RPG bracket. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I got a Vita in June of that year, 2013. I also got a little 3DS, a second-hand one, so I started getting into Nintendo games. I was really, really getting deeply into gaming, as you can see from that. And that year, probably July, August, I can't remember, we happened to be downtown and I saw a big sale sign up and I said to Poodlepa, look at that, Dick Smith Electronics are having a huge sale. What on earth are they doing? Getting rid of all their stock? Well, actually, that was pretty much what they were doing. I can't remember if the shop was preparing to close down, but they were certainly getting rid of all their gaming stock. That was a sign of the times. Most general retailers, like another electronics retailer, just didn't want to handle gaming anymore. It was just too specialised an area, I suppose. And one of the things they were getting rid of in 2013 in New Zealand was the Wii U. Now, I hadn't really planned on buying one. There wasn't any overriding reason why I thought I needed one. But I was a bit intrigued, and I went into the shop and said, do you have any Wii U's left? Oh, no, he said. They all went like, hot cross buns at that price. They were basically just a third of the regular retail price. They're all gone. Oh, I said, that's a shame. I might have considered getting one. He went to his back storeroom and he came back with a box and he said, I found one. There's one left here. You can have that one. I thought, well, it's a bit of a no-brainer at that price. I grabbed it. And, I'm really glad I did, because there's a few games for the Wii U that are just timeless for me and that I really love, like Wind Waker and Tokyo Mirage Sessions I first played on the Wii U. And of course the one game that only exists on that platform that is trapped there is Xenoblade Chronicles X. And I have mentioned that before, obviously in my Xenoblade video, but I'm glad I have that Wii U, if only for that one game. That's how important I think it is. My life was revolving more and more around gaming. And I guess you can all kind of understand that because you're all gamers and you know how you can get transported into the world of whichever game you're playing, and you're enjoying it either on your own as single player or with friends online. There are so many ways of enjoying games. And what was important to me was that I had to use all my capacities. You have to use your brain. A lot of people out there who know nothing about games think it's really dumb and easy. Well, obviously that couldn't be further from the truth. As I found, you need a very sharp brain, and quick reflexes are a bonus. I don't really have those anymore, but it certainly helps keeping my reflexes in trim. So before I knew it, several months had passed, and Poodlepa and I looked at each other, and we were actually having some sort of life back. It looked different to what we'd had before, but it was a life and it was working. I don't think you can ask for anything more than that, for something to help shepherd you through possibly the darkest period in your life, where life just looked almost not worth living. So that's basically how I fell into gaming. I think if it hadn't been for the set of rather extraordinary circumstances that I explained earlier, it probably would never have happened. But life is strange, and it will throw you into these situations, and you just have to be open to trying something new. And in my case, the solution was literally sitting there in my hallway, constantly causing me to stub my toe on it, until I finally gave it a go, and found that this was the one thing that brought me solace. And I think there is one game above all that exemplifies how much gaming can do for you. You all know my love of Atelier games, and in 2014 I finally played my first ever Atelier game. Yes, the beautiful Atelier Ayesha. I still think it has one of the most gorgeous opening themes of almost any Atelier game.
La, 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 la. La, 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 my best!
I won't let you escape! I'll incinerate all in my way! You're so troublesome.
And yes! That was an easy win!
Now, Atelier Ayesha, if you don't know the story, revolves around, obviously, the alchemist Ayesha, who has lost her younger sister. She disappeared, as presumed dead. And Ayesha decides to go on a journey, not only to become a full-fledged alchemist, but to try and find out what happened to her much-loved sister. And this really, really struck a chord with me, both the characters and the situation they were in. And I could sense the incredible sadness behind Ayesha's life, and I got completely wrapped up in it. I went on that journey truly together with Ayesha. Atelier Ayesha, when I finished the main story, had shown me that a good video game can be cathartic. Now, I think everybody's different, and for some people going through a trauma, they just need something that will take them completely into a world as different as possible away from that experience that they suffered through or were still suffering from. And for other people, sometimes it's good to go on a very similar journey, but in a prescribed environment that's safe, like a game is, to sort of go through your feelings that way. And though it was at times for me a bit sort of, I got teary-eyed and all that, I would say afterwards I felt incredibly refreshed, like I'd been in a very, very clear ocean and had a swim and felt like washed clean. The beach was sparkling and the sky was sparkling blue. I knew there was another and better day to come. And that is a gift that very few things can give us, I think. Sometimes a really good movie or a really good book, I mean, they will stay with you for a long time throughout your life, and thinking back to them, you will find solace in that, I think. But a game is different because you spend so much time with it, especially with an RPG, and because you are an agent in the game, because without you doing things, nothing will happen. And to some extent, you direct which way the characters and the story goes. And to my mind, that provides a level of immersion that few other media can match, and that makes the experience that much more potent. So my experience with Atelier Ayesha will also explain to some extent why the Atelier games are so important in my life. It makes sense, really, doesn't it? And I have found that all the Atelier games I played after that one all gave me the kind of experience, a feeling of adventure, but also comfort that helps me get through things. Because let's face it, life is not easy, especially nowadays for most of us. Anything that helps us get through life a bit better is good in my eyes. So this also explains my particular attachment to the PlayStation 3, obviously, since I started my gaming life with it and had such a overwhelmingly positive experience with it. I cannot relate to people who niggle about it like on a technical level or something. Yeah, okay. For me, anything in the end is important because of what goes through the heart. And I associate a very specific time in my life with the PlayStation 3, the ups and downs, the frustrations over not being able to play certain games, not understanding them, failing again, but always getting up and having another go. Developing as a gamer, I think it has enriched my life immeasurably. And maybe that's also one reason why I feel compelled, I suppose, to share that experience with other people. Sometimes to remind them how great games can be. Because I've had a very compact experience, only about 8.5 years, but in that time I've done a lot. So if I can share all the good things about games with others, maybe just make your day a little bit better sometimes. That's my way of saying, hey, I got through a really difficult patch, and games do help. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the games. Let's talk about our experience, what it means to us. That's what it's all about in the end for me. And the moment I don't feel that anymore, I wouldn't do it anymore. I wouldn't do the channel. I wouldn't play the games. But honestly, I cannot see that day ever coming, because as long as there are stories and so many different ways of telling the stories and getting us to live the stories through the game, as long as that is there, I'm there to play the games, follow the story, have that experience, and share it with you guys. And look at me now. I didn't know what a video game was 8.5 years ago, really. And here I am, and what a fantastic time it is to be a gamer. And I've got several PlayStations, I've got an Xbox now, I've got several Nintendo consoles, I even got a laptop that can play PC games, I've got my Vitas. There are wonderful games for each and every one of these platforms, and nowadays most of them are pretty much cross-platform, so we can really share them. It's a wonderful time. I'm enjoying every moment as much as I can, because I know what it's like not being able to really feel and experience anything, because you're that low, deep down in the dumps. Anything that will help get you out of there is important. Okay, I think I've talked enough. That is the whole story, all of it, from start to finish. All I can say is it's my story, and if it's helped you in any little way, I hopefully have done a reasonable job in explaining what it's like as a 60-something old lady to stumble into video games and discover the most amazing Wonderworld. Thank you very much for watching. As always, please keep well. I'm food for dogs. Bye-bye.